My book is about a lot of things, but fundamentally it's an exploration of what it looks like to live an unmarried life, a happily unmarried life. And I tell that story through my own coming of age as an adult woman, thinking about marriage versus not marriage, and the lives of 5 women who lived at the turn of the last century, whose lives and works influenced my own thinking.
And why did you write your book?
I wrote the book because I was frustrated by how there was no representation in literature or popular media of happily unmarried women. And I knew them around me eventually. You know, when I was growing up, all the women I knew who were not married were unhappily unmarried. They were divorced or widowed or looking for a man. But in my own adulthood, as I grew older, I knew more and more women who were very happy on their own. But I didn't see representations of that kind of way of living in the media, so I wanted to create that. I learned so much from these women I write about, so I had to write a whole book to describe. Let's see, how can I pare it down? I learned from them that living alone well takes a lot of intention. It's not as simple as being able to pay the rent. So economic independence is fundamental to the single woman's life. That's how a woman is able to live independently. But it requires a lot of figuring out time management, how to spend your time, how much time alone versus time with friends versus time at work. It's very easy to get out of balance. So I learned, it was the novelist Edith Wharton, oddly enough, who really taught me about that and about the importance of making my living space the way that I want it, that's comfortable for me and expressive of me, and a way where I can spend hours and hours and hours alone happily, and also bring guests in and have dinner parties or have people over for tea. But just to make that living alone takes intention, but it's as full as living with others or living in a house, even a small space. Let's see. The importance of work is fundamental to my own happiness. I know some disagree. Some like to take time off. But so that was another thing about the importance of finding meaningful work and finding a way to do it and keep on doing it is, as we know, not easy. I feel very lucky that I get to do what I want to be doing. Also, the importance of conducting your relationships with honesty and integrity and communication. I mean, obviously that's important for anybody, whether or not they're single, but for instance, more at mid-century, the idea of in America at least, the mistress was popular because people couldn't get out of marriage. It was very hard to get out of marriage, and so infidelity was more, I'm not going to say infidelity was more common, but the role of the mistress was more common. And that's been romanticized a lot as well. The kind of the seductive femme fatale. Women write about being a mistress. Oh, it's perfect for me. I get to have my own time. Only see this man every so often. But for me, I really like to conduct myself with transparency and honesty, and I feel grateful that I live in a time where I can live alone, independently, and have lovers, have boyfriends, but not need to be a mistress, because I don't like the idea of betraying another woman. It does not feel comfortable to me. Oh, yes, it's, as we know, artists need a lot of time alone in order to create. So solitude is essential to painters and writers. But so it was essential to me in my own life, becoming a writer. I knew that I needed to find a way to have a purposeful solitude, which took work in order to be able to afford the time to be alone, and find a way to be working enough to pay for my own life without working too much, so that I didn't have time to create for myself. But I think that the lessons of solitude are important for everyone, whether or not we're an artist, that being by ourselves in a way that feels, again, intentional and purposeful is very rewarding, and it's how we learn how to listen to ourselves and listen to our inner voices and conduct our lives on our own terms. So one doesn't need to be an artist in order to incorporate solitude into a life. Well, once upon a time, historically, women needed marriage. We needed it for economic security. We needed it for social comfort. The stigma against unmarried women was so strong. And today, marriage really is an option. It's not a necessity. So when I was starting out in my adulthood, I was thinking, oh no, should I get married? Should I stay single? What should I do? And trying to figure that out. And it really wasn't until I sat down to focus on writing the book that I realized marriage versus not marriage is a false dichotomy in the 21st century because we just don't need it the way that we once did. And one does not need to, I think it used to be you were married or you were a lonely spinster, right? And it was kind of you were happy or you were alone and sad. You were happy and married or you were alone and sad. And now you can be married or you can be alone and happy and fulfilled. And so thinking about it in terms of marriage versus not marriage just doesn't matter in the way that it once did. And so I realized that I've been living my life as an unmarried woman beyond those two poles, that I have, it's a different category almost, that I live alone, I live independently, I live, I have love, I have relationships that come in and out. There's, great love, great heartache, but it's all part of it, and it's all about a way of being engaged with the world and the people around me. Yes, I think that the longing to be alone and independent and self-reliant is one that many women have often had throughout history, but only wealthy women could really indulge that, because the only way a woman could be alone was if she was wealthy and could afford to do so. So most women had to marry or become nuns. That was another way of being alone. But today, because women have so many opportunities and because it's so much easier to live alone, we're seeing more of what I call the spinster state of mind, that women who are happily independent, living by themselves, it's a way of being, and this way of being and living, someone can be in a couple or outside of a couple. It's not about, it's still hard for me to explain, but it's a spinster state of mind is a way of being in the world, and it doesn't matter if you're married or not married. It's about holding on to your autonomy, to your self-reliance, to your sense of self and your inner self. And that's important to do whether you're alone or inside of a couple. You still need to retain that sense of self and not get lost inside the couple. Well, for me, it's been men who also need a lot of time alone are the ones that I am able to get into relationships with, because then we both need our time. Also, feminist-minded men, I think, are very important because they understand strong women and are not threatened by that. Is that... it's hard. Am I answering that for myself or for women in general? For myself. Oh, I could go on and on about myself, but I like hilarious and brilliant and handsome.
Okay.
What I really hope for with the book is I tried to make it personal and intimate, and also an absorbing reading experience. I really learned from contemporary nonfiction masters like Janet Malcolm or Malcolm Gladwell, people who talk about ideas through stories. And specifically in my case, I was using memoir and stories from my own life, and then biography. I love reading biographies. I love reading about other lives and getting lost in the stories of other people's lives. And so I was using my stories and their stories as a way of animating and illuminating ideas that would otherwise be too dry or abstract or just boring to read. So I wanted to create an absorbing reading experience that inspired the reader to engage with these questions that have engaged me and create a conversation with herself or himself in the same way that, for me, all this time, reading the biographies and the works of these women had created an internal conversation for me that helped me think through questions. So I put myself into the book as a way, so in a way the reader is confronting my biography, and the reader can agree with me or disagree with me, but by putting myself into the story, I think it makes it easier to engage with the questions. And so then create an internal conversation is my number one goal. That's what I want. And then if that reader wants to create that conversation with the people in her life, all the better. But for me, it's really a book about conversation. I took internal conversations I'd been having with myself and these women for a very long time and put them on the page to create conversations in others.